Everybody, thanks for joining us. Happy Friday. I'm Josh Turnbow. Matt is off today. We're pleased to have you watching the show. We have an interesting topic today, and we have one of our WorldNetDaily columnists joining us. This will be Dr. Jerry Newcomb, and we're going to bring Jerry in now. Jerry, thanks for joining us. Our topic today is going to be, is Gen Z, or the younger generation, trending after all of the insanity, all the super woke stuff, trending more towards a traditional way of life? And we're going to cover that. Jerry is an expert. He is the executive director of the Providence Forum and a historian. And Jerry has experience in what tradition previously looked like before it nearly became eradicated here in the United States, as the woke agenda and the feminist movement have really taken hold. So we're going to cover that ground. Jerry, we would love you to introduce yourself, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Josh. It's a privilege. And I'm very grateful that WorldNetDaily has been running my column virtually every week. In fact, I think literally every week since late December of 2012. So on a weekly basis. And a lot of the things I do write about are related to America's history and especially our Judeo-Christian roots, because it's really kind of an untold story. And so Providence Forum, by the way, that was organized and initiated by Dr. Peter Lilback. And then he donated it generously to Coral Ridge Ministries, and I'm the one privileged to lead it. But Dr. Lilback and I wrote a book many years ago about the faith of George Washington, and it ended up becoming a bestseller. And the book just documents what everybody knows when you look at the facts. George Washington was a devout 18th century Anglican Christian. And, nobody doubted that until, sometime in the 20th century, when you had all the revisionist history and the cancel culture and so forth. But as one church put it, you gave George Washington back to the church. Well, he has never left the church. If George Washington wasn't a true, sincere Christian, he was a tremendous, tremendous actor. But the fact of the matter is, Josh, whether we're talking about George Washington or Abraham Lincoln or many of the other founding fathers, well, not that Abe Lincoln was a founding father, but he was obviously a key American leader.
Right, foundational to the country, yeah.
Exactly. There is a faith factor that's often ignored or that is often distorted. Even some of the ones with the more questionable views, like Thomas Jefferson, there's a lot to be said in reference to, for example, Jefferson wrote the Declaration, or the first draft of the Declaration of Independence, 1776. Well, in 1777, as a layman, he was involved in the creation of a church that called an evangelical minister as the pastor. It was called the Calvinistical Reformed Church of Charlottesville. It met in the Charlottesville courthouse. They called the Reverend Charles Clay, who was an evangelical. A book I co-wrote on this called Doubting Thomas, all about, the totality of Jefferson's religious views through the years. And they did change. He became more liberal over time. But at the end of the book, Doubting Thomas, we have a couple of sermons from the Reverend Charles Clay, which to our knowledge, none of his sermons have ever been in print to our book. You read those books and it's like, this is straightforward gospel preaching. This is what Jefferson supported. He donated money, more money than any of the other lay people for that particular church, the Calvinistical Reformed Church. So the people who think, well, all of his life and had more of a liberal understanding about God, and we were more of a deist, or than he was a born again Christian, or I don't know about the born again part, but I can certainly say about the Christian theology part, that in the early years, including when he wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, he had more of a Christian worldview than people give him credit for.
Jerry, so this is why we need people like you, historians, because at this point in culture, we feel so far removed from those early days, those foundational days of the country. Now we find ourselves in a hyper woke society, and young people are the most lost in their formative years, trying to figure out where they are in this society, because it's mostly come up bankrupt for them. And so I'm going to just reference here. Is there a culture shift taking place? Because in the midst of feminism, hyperfeminism, LGBTQIA plus culture shifting, we also have these movements that we're going to cover today. We specifically see in Gen Z, which is young men are trending more conservative, as there's a divergence where women are becoming more liberal, but some women are falling into a new category. They generically call, the Gen Zers called trad wife or traditional wife, which is women rejecting feminism and moving towards more traditional values like marriage and child rearing in marriage. Homeschool is massively trending, which there's always been homeschool, but now the idea of homeschool is trending. And then finally, like we see this with RFK, that one of the major tenets of his campaign is the rejection of pharma over healthy food. And this really does feel like we're returning to something, and maybe that something being more defined as you have started to define it is really what we're missing.
Well, in some ways, the pendulum swings, different ways and so forth. But when you actually consider the whole history of the Christian movement, I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's amazing that there's anybody that's a Christian in light of the fact that, beginning with the temple authorities, and then you go into Rome, okay, ancient Rome, they pulled out all the stops to destroy the church. Then there were movements within the church that were official that basically tried to stifle, dissenting voices and so forth. And then later on, with the rise of Islam, there was a destruction of so many churches. But fast forward to today, and we see in the last 100 years or so, there's just been such a strong rise of unbelief. And in fact, I mean, the whole Soviet Union, and then later on, the National Socialist Workers' Party, the Nazis, the Germans, they didn't allow people who believed in Jesus that would, hide Jews and so forth. They didn't agree with the Holocaust program and so forth. This idea of trying to create a master race instead of believing in Darwinian evolution, which the Nazis did. These Christians, agreed with the Bible. Man is made in the image of God. Jews are special, and Jews are people anyway. And hide them. And so, one of my great heroes is, I'm sure you've heard of her, Corrie ten Boom.
Yeah.
Who wrote Hiding Place. And Corrie ten Boom and her sister ended up in concentration camps for the crime of hiding Jews in their native Holland. And by the way, one of my favorite quotes comes from Corrie ten Boom. I try to say it often, is look to others, be distressed. Look to self, be depressed. Look to Jesus and be blessed.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. Well, so Corrie ten Boom, more than 80 years ago now, and now here we see that we're going to go back to our script here of Gen Z young men and college. So Gen Z men are quickly becoming the most conservative generation in 50 years.
Wow.
Thinking for themselves. They want to buy a home. They want to have families, and which is interesting because simultaneously, as we bring up this image here, we'll see that there's a divergence happening between males and females. So here we have in this Reuters image, and this has been tracked now for several decades. South Korea, you see this massive divergence of women and men changing with a difference in ideology. So the way they see the entire world. In the US, you see it. This is the men and the women arrow breaking away from each other. And I think young people will tell you that it is maybe the most difficult time to even try to have a relationship with the opposite sex, as they try to find common ground. Men trending more towards conservative values, women sadly embracing progressive or feminist values. Would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. I mean, obviously, let's take the example of abortion.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, abortion has been touted, at least here in America, as if it's quote unquote health care. And yet I've
Right.
interviewed all kinds of people through the years on radio programs and podcasts and so forth, that women included, that are like, no, abortion is not health care. Abortion involves taking the life of a human baby, an unborn baby. But it's been sold this way, so that if you really believed in women's rights, you would believe in abortion. Well, just the other day, I was privileged to be a part of a prayer webinar. Praying for the election. Kind of a countdown in praying for the election, and one of the four participants, I was one of four.
Mm-hmm.
Another one was Dr. Alveda King. Dr. Alveda King is the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She's born again, and she's very, very strong pro-life. She even said in the webinar, she said, part of the reason I'm so pro-life is because I had two abortions
Oh,
and then
wow.
later had a miscarriage. And I know what this does. And abortion is not the right way to go. And, God is the author of life, and we should cherish life from the womb to the tomb and beyond. And so anyway, it was just fascinating to hear that. By the way, that webinar was a part of Coral Ridge Ministries, which is my employer. I'm with Providence Forum, or I head up Providence Forum, but that's under the aegis of Coral Ridge Ministries, founded by Dr. D. James Kennedy, now led by Dr. Robert J. Pacienza.
Fantastic.
That webinar, yeah.
I wanted to show this clip. This is I don't know if you're familiar with Vivek Ramaswamy, but we'd love to show you this clip. This is coming, from the very top of the political influencers. Vivek is huge, and very well may be part of the Trump administration. I want to play this clip and get your take on it.
And our message to Gen Z is this: you're going to be the generation that actually saves this country. You want to be a rebel? You want to be a hippie? You want to stick it to the man? Show up on your college campus and try calling yourself a conservative. Say you want to get married, have kids, teach them to believe in God and pledge allegiance to their country. Because you know what? Fear has been infectious in this country, but courage can be contagious too. That too is what it means to be an American.
That is excellent. That is really good. That is really good. We have gotten to the place, because of political correctness, where honestly, to believe what God has revealed to us, what actually works. I mean, for example, take the issue of marriage and the family. God is the one who designed the marriage. God is the one who designed the family. As a Christian minister, I'm ordained in the Presbyterian Church, the conservative branch of it. There is a big liberal branch of it. But anyway, we believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. And I remember one time I got to interview Kay Coles James, who served in the first Bush administration. And she became the president of the Heritage Foundation. And she said something like this. She said, the family, the natural family, is God's original health and human services department.
Right. Yeah.
Which makes sense. I mean, the family is so important.
Yeah.
In fact, if you look, for example, the issue of fatherlessness. Fatherlessness is a terrible malady for so many in our society. It's just a reality, a sociological reality. Some people want to say, well, that's racist. Well, no, it's not racist. What's tragic is the way so many of the government policies, for example, runaway welfare spending, in effect, what it did for so many, and still does, is it rewards having babies out of wedlock and then penalizing families that stay together. Well, if the government subsidizes essentially fatherlessness, then why are we surprised when we see kids shooting kids, and kids, from broken families, with all kinds of terrible problems. It's just, it's incredible. And I think that, we're just chasing our tail when people say, oh, we need to just keep throwing money at these government programs. A lot of times these government programs can actually exacerbate the very problem that they're trying to solve. God is the one who's designed the family. So if some of these young people today are starting to, realize, hey, this is better, I like that.
Right.
Family is so important. And I thank God. I thank God every day that 46 years ago, I met my wife to be, that 44 years ago, that we got married, that we're still married, we're still happily married, that we had two wonderful kids, and that our daughter has now, with her husband, had three wonderful grandchildren. And it's incredible. It's such a blessing to be a part of the family. And so, part of the whole problem of society is this breakdown of the family. So the political correct folks
Mm-hmm.
have, in effect, they're against the traditional family, what God has said about the family, and so we all suffer because of it.
Jerry, so you did bring up a great segue point here I want to pull up, and that is specifically family and being married. But we also have an issue economically now. We have a clip here that we'll bring up of young people are saying that they're not sure how they will ever own a home. Let's watch this real quick.
I think, Emily, that Gen Z is the new swing voter.
Absolutely. I think Gen Z has specifically been hit very hard by the Biden administration's policies. Like I said, many of us can't even fathom owning a home or raising a child within the next 10 years. And that idea of the American dream is so far out of reach. So we want to see a president who is going to bring real leadership back into the White House. I think Gen Z realizes that the 2024 election is all about security of our wallets, security of our border, and security of our homes. We realize that Donald Trump dominates in every single one of those categories.
So, Jerry, we do have this disconnect between what we want, what people know is right, and they're inclined to do, have families, they want homes. People want to do this, but more than ever, they say they cannot. And largely this is because of where we've gone politically, right? So the economy is affected by politics. Housing is insane. It's very difficult to make enough money to even qualify for a home. So we kind of have this disconnect. We need to find a bridge for people are trending, the younger generation are trending towards this thing they want. But there is this air gap between that thing and their ability to get to it. And how do we bridge that?
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. I was thinking about this even recently, especially after I saw the movie Reagan, which I really enjoyed and I recommend highly to people. And I realized, when I was starting out in our marriage, so we got married in 1980, and within months, Ronald Reagan became the president, and then began that really long peacetime time of security where the economy was really good. And I realized even part of the reason that Clinton did well overall politically, economically, was by not pushing as strong as he tried. He tried initially to push the liberal policies economically, and that was clearly not working. So then he kind of let back and let the Reagan tax cuts still continue to do their work, and thus the expansion continued for a while until there was a big bust, in the late 1990s. But bottom line is, I was thinking, man, I was able to, we were able to buy our first house in 1987, my wife and I, and that was really a blessing. And then, frankly, my parents gave us a loan personally that helped. I mean, it jump started the whole thing. But there was a lady in our church that was a real estate lady that took us around, and we were able to, afford it, and it was great. Now it's so hard to see how people could can do that. So I really do hope that the economy can get back to where it needs to be. Otherwise, you know, that lady is right. You know, people are not going to have these kinds of opportunities. By the way, when I was married, and we were married in Norway, my wife is from Norway,
Hmm.
and our you know, vows were "Yeah, I do." And it was bilingual. But
Yeah.
the minister said in that service a verse that I'd never heard of before. It was kind of obscure. It was from Deuteronomy, but it says, he said, "As your days are, so shall your strength be." And the idea of it is when you need it, it will be available to you. You know, just keep doing the right thing, keep plugging away. And I think what happens is this is, by the way, one of the ways that abortion is sometimes sold to people. They're basically told, "Oh, you're pregnant. You're going to have a baby. Do you know how
Hmm.
much a baby's going to cost? Do you know how much you're
Right.
going to have to do this?" And then, you know, and then they start adding up all these costs and they say, "Can you afford this?" "No, I can't afford it." "Well, then here, you just pay us $800 and we'll take care of this problem for you." And,
Well, it's
you know, and
disgusting.
it's just so sad. Again, as your days are, so shall your strength be. And so there's just a lot of misinformation that's told in this society. And I really do hope a lot of young people will realize that you know, in fact, there's a promise from God's word. He knows what we need. He says, "Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all the things we need shall be added unto us."
That's fantastic, Jerry, and so true. And I think maybe that's maybe that missing element of the turning to God is what maybe the younger generation will do, which you know, it may just be a new thing that we're going to enter a time where, you know, even like, let's say in the 80s, housing prices were not terribly high. Interest rates were, there was a balance there, but now we have kind of this problem where both things are high prices.
Yeah.
Interest rates are relatively high, but prices are so high that people are kind of at their limit. Even though people, and we're going to through these next clips show that there is this massive trend, especially for the traditional return to tradition for women, where they're embracing this idea of homesteading has never been more popular. Men doing trades is popular all over again. That has a lot to do with men are kind of rejecting college largely because, well, college is rejecting them. And men are looking around and saying, like, what do I really want? We're going to bring this clip up real quick here. I think the next clip we'll show is, it'll be like more of this women returning to tradition.
I think it's been really interesting to see how shocked people are by the term trad wife and how they seem to think it's some new way of living, like it's some unprecedented new trend. Like, have you seen these millennial and Gen Z girls? They just want to be at home with their kids. They want to have husbands and they want to take care of their husbands. They want to cook and they want to clean and they want to wear dresses. It's insane. When in reality, it's literally like the oldest lifestyle in the book. Before this, they were just called stay-at-home moms. And before that, they were just called women. But now our society has gone so far in the feminist direction that anybody who wants to live like a little bit old school and a little bit like how women used to live is fringe, right? Like an extremist. And I just think about how so many of us, since we were little, we were raised in this kind of boss babe feminist society that told us you can be so much more than just a mom. You can be so much more than just a wife. And so many of us listened and we, you know, tried to climb corporate ladders and we boss babed so hard. Now, like, we're a little bit boss babed out. And some of us want to go a little bit more back to our roots, to our ancestors, to the women who came before us and live a little bit more, you know, like they did. Call us crazy.
That's interesting. My wife basically would fit in that category, and so was my daughter. My daughter is rearing an 11-year-old girl, an 8-year-old boy, and a 6-year-old girl, and there are a lot of challenges and so forth. So there's so much to that. But I here's what I want to say. In the early 1990s, Barbara Bush, the president of George H.W. Bush, was invited to speak at Wellesley College, the graduation address. And there were a lot of feminists, including within the college itself, that said, "Oh, no. Her big claim to fame is that she's married to the president," or whatever. You know, what are her achievements, you know, by herself? And she was able to give the speech after all. And in that speech, she so famously said some things like along these lines. She said, when you're on your deathbed and you're looking back over your life, I guarantee you, you will not regret that you did not make that last sale, that you did not, take that other job, but you will regret time not spent with your loved ones, with your family, with your spouse, with your children, and so forth. So she said, you have to, look at what are the really important things in life. I can remember even in the context of work where when you get involved in so many busy deadlines and so forth, and if there's a colleague and she happens to be, she's married and everything, and then she's going to have a baby, and you realize, well, that baby's going to interfere with the deadlines. And it's like, no, 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 no. All that really counts is that baby. That baby, is the future. And so there's something beautiful about that. And so,
Mm.
and I think, look at the example where that I don't follow sports, but there's a kicker with the Kansas Chiefs or something, Kansas
Mhm.
Chiefs. Okay. And so he gave a speech, and it was at a Catholic college, and he was talking about Catholic values. And he said that, for you women that choose to be the stay-at-home moms, like the girl was talking about in that little video,
Right.
more power to you. If you choose to go out in the workforce, great, more power to you. But for you who are feeling like this is what you want to fulfill for your life and so forth, I commend that. I think that's what the will of God is for you at that particular juncture. I remember even Phyllis Schlafly, who was opposed to the feminist movement, and yet she was very accomplished in her own,
Right.
career and so forth as an attorney. She
Yeah.
founded, the Eagle Forum and so forth, which to my knowledge still goes on to this very day.
Yeah,
Anyway,
we just had a guest from the Eagle Forum on
well, there you go. And
Wednesday.
and so Phyllis Schlafly said that women should often think even in terms of the possibility of sequencing, that in this particular time of your life,
Mm.
you dedicate it to your career, but then you have the children and the babies and so forth. You gotta commit to them. But what are you going to do? Pay somebody else to watch them for you? I mean,
Right.
if somebody is stuck in that, I'm sorry, and
Mm.
we should pray that you'd have the opportunity to be the mother to that particular child. So anyway,
Yeah.
bottom line is, she said there's different sequences, and later on, when the children get older and you feel led, you move on to other things, along with your husband and so forth, building up the family. But I think this breakdown of the family, that is so much of what we're dealing with. So, I just this morning in a bike ride, I passed a place that
Mhm.
type of ministry to children from broken homes. And I just said a quick prayer of thanks to, Lord, thank you for the loving home that I was reared in, with, mom and dad, and they modeled what it means to be a good family, a lot of laughter, a lot of children, a lot of, you know, just a lot of fun, but still, having a good, solid family is just so critical. As the family goes, so goes society.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, well, this has been fantastic, Jerry. I want to just ask you one brief question. And then we'll wrap up. But Jerry, you're a historian. You know America's history, but we're entering a new phase. What do you maybe expect in this next phase here? That's less than, I don't know, less than 50 days away, 40 something days away. We have the election and a new phase for the country. What do you expect to come?
Well, let me say what I think ultimately we need to get back to, or if that's
Hmm.
okay. I think, first of all, we're just a couple years away from the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which is our birth certificate.
Right.
The essence of the Declaration of Independence, if you could summarize it in two phrases, it's what America is all about: self-rule under God.
Hmm.
And quite frankly, the left doesn't like either of those two phases or phrases. Self-rule, so in other words, they want the government to control everything, and then under God. Well, there is no God, they think, or effectively, they think there is no God, and so forth. So they try to basically, rule against Christian freedoms and so forth. You see that happening all over the place. And
Right.
so I think the question is, in 2 years, in July 4th, 2026, will it be morning in America? MORNING. Hey, this is great. 250 years. Thank God that here we are in this country, and we've had all this and enjoyed all this freedom all these years, and a lot of problems, yes, but we've been working through a lot of those problems. Okay, or will it be morning in America? MOURNING.
Right.
Because quite frankly, the 20th century saw over and over and over experiments in getting rid of, God, getting rid of private property. I'm talking about communism. And it's the same thing with with a variation of it, the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany. Look, the 20th century was the bloodiest century on record. The term genocide was coined. This is a book from Harvard University Press, 1999, The Black Book of Communism. And what it does is it catalogs the crimes of the 20th century. There's no reason to go down this road again. We've gone down this road. It's horrible. The founding fathers of America helped prevent a lot of that stuff. And here's why. They saw and recognized man is sinful. And because man is sinful, power must be separated. It must not be allowed to accumulate in the hands of too many people. The filibuster is a good thing because it keeps the power from accumulating too much. All men having power ought to be distrusted, said James Madison, a key architect of the American Constitution. Our Constitution, attacked as it is, assaulted as it is, bedraggled as it may seem to be, is still our governing document. And because of that, our freedom endures, tattered and torn, but it's still there. Now, in contrast, these Marxist countries, they built on the foundation of the idea that man is basically good. It's society that's corrupt. In the case of Marx and Engels, they were basically saying, okay, look, in the Communist Manifesto, 1848, what we need to do is get rid of private property and have everything to be owned, and we'll have equality of outcome. And then once
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it does. Once the workers achieve all this communism, this Marxism, then in effect, we will have ushered in the millennium, and government will wither away of its own accords. And instead of that happening, because of the sinful nature of man, and man is still sinful. Man was sinful in 1787 when the founders wrote the Constitution. They recognized it. The man was sinful in 1848 when Marx and Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto. Man was still sinful in 1917 when Lenin and Stalin and Trotsky and these other Bolsheviks forced communism. And 70 years of misery. And in fact, there's a former communist couple that were quoted in the National Review magazine when the Soviet Union finally imploded in the early 1990s. And they said, what did the Soviet Union have to show for 70 years of communism other than tens of millions of corpses?
Right. Yeah.
Whoa! We don't need to learn this stuff again. There's a right to private property because God says in the Decalogue, that is the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not steal. Even if thou art the government, thou shalt not steal. The Decalogue also says thou shalt not covet. So you shouldn't be jealous of those who have more. You can earn more yourself. Equality of opportunity is absolutely fantastic. We are created equal and endowed by our rights by the Creator. Remove the knowledge and acknowledgement of the Creator, and we lose those rights. And that's what the 20th century experiments in communism, and, whether you're talking about, again, Stalin or Pol Pot or China, who was the worst mass murderer in the history of humanity?
Mao. Yeah, Chairman
So,
Mao. Correct.
I'm glad you knew that, because a lot of
Mhm.
people don't know that. And, one Chinese immigrant who came here who was totally opposed to communism, having seen what it does
Mhm.
to his native country, he was just shocked to see that there was this kitchen, Mao's kitchen or something,
Oh,
in
yeah.
California. It's like, what are you doing? Are you crazy? It's like every time I see somebody with a Che Guevara T-shirt, I'm
Right.
tempted to ask, excuse me, is your Hitler shirt in the wash or something? What's going on here? We should learn from the communism and the difference. And it was all based on an anti-God philosophy, specifically anti-Christian God philosophy, whereas the founders, they're not all perfect, but they did have a Christian worldview. They believed the Bible. The Bible says, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That's why the Savior, Jesus, came to save people from our sins. But they, in creating this government, not perfect,
Mhm.
but much better than others that have gone before it has that Christian worldview, including the idea that all men having power, this power needs to be diffused. As John Adams said,
Right.
he said, those that are in power, tend to become ravenous beasts of prey, even good people having power. So power corrupts. Absolute power tends to corrupt. That's why it must be diffused. It must be divided. And that's what you see in the Constitution. It's built in there.
Gosh, great points, Jerry. I'm hopeful that we can return to that at some point.
Yeah, and by the way, if I could, at
Yeah.
providenceforum.org,
Yeah.
especially if you look for the link on the Foundation of American Liberty series, I've made a whole series of films.
Uh-huh.
It's one of the earliest links that you'll see on the page, the Foundation of American Liberty series. But it's basically 7-hour-long documentaries I made, plus lots of bonus footage in addition. And I've carved a lot of this information up into small, 5-minute videos and so forth, but all about the Pilgrims, the Puritans, the Quakers, all about the how education was all based on the Bible in the first 200 to 300 years. Harvard, Dartmouth, Yale, Princeton, William and Mary, they were all Christian schools, thoroughly Christian
Right.
schools. Dennis Prager, for example, in our video makes the point. He's one of the guests, and Oz Guinness and Eric Metaxas and Bill Federer and Elvita King and Peter Loback and so forth. Anyway, Prager says, to this day, the insignia of Yale University is a certain part of the Hebrew. It gets back to the Hebrew. It was what was on the breastplate of the mantle of the priests. As you find in the Torah, that is in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. He said, do you know how immersed you have to be in Hebrew to understand,
Right.
the Uvave, and then he said, and to this day, that's Yale's insignia. And
I didn't know that.
in the
Yeah.
early days at Harvard and Yale, you had to study the original Hebrew and Greek of the Old Testament and then of the New Testament. Harvard's original motto, of course, was truth for Christ and the church. Now in Latin.
Right.
Today they just cut out the second part of that and just make it veritas. So, but it was veritas Christo et ecclesiae. And by the way, if you walk around Harvard to this day, you can still see, in gradings that, let's say, are as old as 1914 or earlier, you can still see that slogan. That's why they were founded, to train ministers of the gospel of Jesus. And of course, we've gotten away from all that. But back when the Bible was the chief textbook in one way or another, we were very literate. And so we deal with all these kinds of things, and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and Christian principles involved in that, plus a whole biography on George Washington, because he was so pivotal to American freedom and independence.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jerry. So, and can people find you on social media or X or
Well,
Facebook?
Sure, but I would prefer above all providenceforum.org, because they can
Okay.
interact with that stuff, and there's quizzes, and again, my main thing is, let's get back to this. This is how America became what it became. This is the source of our greatness.
Yeah.
The Judeo-Christian tradition. Can I give a quick anecdote on that?
Yes, please.
Okay. About 10 to 15 years ago, I saw a news item where it said that there were some Chinese intellectuals that said they were trying to figure out what was the reason that America in particular, the West in general, but the America in particular, became so successful. And they said, there's this strand and there's that strand, but above all, what really counts is religion. That's what they said. And when I learned that, I asked the publisher of a book I wrote called The Book That Made America. It's still in print with Nordskog Publishing and so forth. I said, you know what? I'm willing to even donate money. I'd like to see this translated into the Chinese. And we did. We got it translated into Chinese. And I was very grateful. But the reason for that is because if that's what those intellectuals think, they need to know these things. Now, by the way, with the rise of Xi, as the dictator in China, any thought along those lines of some of those intellectuals of Chinese, those Chinese intellectuals have been put on hold. There's just a very strong, unfortunately, they're very strong atheistic emphasis. In fact, one of my WorldNetDaily columns talked about how Xi has actually had translations of the Bible, or a translation of the Bible, which changed things, and it really changes the meaning. I mean, he in the Chinese translation of the Bible, they took the story where there's a woman caught in adultery, and the men want to stone her, and Jesus, says, well, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. And so the leaders that were about to stone her, they all left. The oldest first, they dropped their stones and just left. And then Jesus says to her, neither do I condemn you, but go and sin no more. And in the Chinese version, what it says is that Jesus says, as they grab their stones, he says, okay, stone her. She's disobeyed the law.
Really?
Yes. I mean, this is just astounding,
talk about blasphemy.
Talk about blasphemy that human beings would, I mean, and by the way, there were other reports where they were, burning copies of the scripture. And I've talked to many that have said that they've taken, social media, websites, let's say, where, like BibleGateway.org or, something like that, that kind of thing. And you can't access it in China because of their firewalls or whatever. So there's a suppression of the truth at present, but there is no plan that will succeed against the Lord. And we've seen in times past where, the walls have gotten torn down. That's why I love that Reagan movie, because, the Reagan movie, I don't know if you've seen it, but it really, I haven't yet. Christianity informed his worldview, Ronald Reagan's worldview, that led him into that crusade. The John Voight character holds up a book that I used to have a copy of right in this office. I used to have a copy of it. I may still have it buried somewhere, but but it was a book from 1903 that Ronald Reagan read. He read this book called that Printer of Udell's, and the idea of the book, it was a Christian novel, and it showed a young man who really wanted to serve God. He became devout Christian, was baptized, and then eventually went to Washington, D.C. in order to serve God there in that capacity. And in effect, that book helped set the trajectory of Ronald Reagan's life. And so that book, or that movie rather, shows the Christian side of things. And so, when Reagan says, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall,
the famous words.
It's so dramatic, but it grows out of that Christian conviction. You cannot have freedom coexisting, with tyranny. And that's why the tyrannists do so much they can to suppress the free speech. That's why WorldNetDaily plays such a key role. Weren't you guys like among the very first to use the internet?
Yeah.
A free press for a free people.
Yeah, one of the
That's
first.
exactly right.
Well, Jerry, I want to thank you so much for coming on, and we hope to have you back. And everybody, please go check out the Providence Forum, and we'll put that in the show notes. And we want to thank you for coming on the show, Jerry. Thanks so much.
Sure, thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, everybody, that was Jerry Newcomb. We really appreciate him coming on and sharing all of his really insightful knowledge. And what we want to do now is we want to just segue to a tease. We're going to tease this new show that we have coming out. It's actually, the episodes are up now at worldnetdaily.com. And this show is from our founder, Elizabeth Farah. And she is doing a series called Kamala's America, The Nightmare Scenarios. And we're going to play just a sample of that here now.
What would happen if you lose? Well, I'll tell you what will happen. They'll take away your guns. They'll take away your money. They'll take away your voice. You're done. It's over. You don't get to fight back. So in the past, if somebody wins and terrible things happen, it's not an existential crisis. You get another bite at the apple. This time, like, they're going to take your teeth away. You will never get another bite at the apple.
So you can see that that episode is up now on the website and our social media channels. But Elizabeth has incredible guests, including Dennis Prager, Dr. Robert Malone, and of course you saw there Eric Metaxas. And if you go over to our Rumble channel, you can see all of these episodes there, as well as on our X channel. We'll be putting those up, and our YouTube, which, it's censored, so who knows how long stuff will stay up there. And of course, we want you to follow us on the other channels, like our Instagram, which has incredible, largely pop culture related and political, kind of like this intersection of politics and pop culture, which is seemingly now all things are touched by politics. And you can go over there and see some incredible stories, keep you up to date on some of the latest things that are happening. For instance, with P. Diddy, the illustrious hip hop artist who looks like he's a super corrupted person now, as well as our Telegram channel, where you can see a lot of the unfiltered things that a lot of the other groups censor. And most importantly, our X channel, where we have breaking news. Everything we haven't covered today is being covered over on our X channel. And we want to thank you all for joining us. And of course, Dr. Jerry Newcomb. And we hope that everybody has a fantastic Friday, and we'll see you Monday.